How did I get from Karachi to Oxford? I want to use this video to speak about my journey. So, this is not a tips and tricks on how to get into Oxford, but my honest reflection on my journey of getting into Oxford on a scholarship for a PhD. So, I got into Oxford in 2019 and I came to the UK from Karachi as an oncology student for a PhD, and I got a scholarship from Oxford University. So, I did want to reflect on my journey because a lot of people from back home sadly still think that there are a lot of barriers for them to apply and they wouldn't get in. And I understand, I also did not think I would get in. In fact, while Oxford was a dream, I wasn't really applying to it. I was applying all over the world but Oxford, thinking of being rejected. But in all honesty, I got rejected from every other place almost, but got into Oxford and won a scholarship from Oxford. I did well on my interview, and so well that I actually didn't have to apply for a scholarship. Oxford nominated me for one of its own graduate scholarships. So I think that was a big win. And all these years later, at the time of recording this video, it's been 7 years since I got in. I've since graduated and now I work here. So I just wanted to go over my journey and walk you through how it became possible. So while I got in 2019, the journey was way longer. I started way back in 2015. So 2015, I was an undergraduate at the University of Karachi at the Department of Microbiology. So I was studying there, and at that point, I already had a lot of people who inspired me, a lot of teachers whom I looked up to, and I thought I would want to do a PhD from abroad. And I used to do a lot of research. Now, in this day and age, you have AI to help you, but back then I used to Google the hell out of everything. I used to Google universities, professors, their research group. So I used to maintain a diary about everything I could find out, and just finding out where would I want to be. So since I was a teenage, I always wanted to be um, going to Australia, and I thought that I would end up there because even in my computer and my saved images, there was always an image of the University of Sydney, because I really hoped to get there. Just because I thought while Oxford, Cambridge seemed much bigger, it also seemed much further away for some reason. I never dared really think about, oh, I could get there. While I wanted to, I didn't really dare think about that. So my journey started in 2015, wanting to apply to PhD programs abroad and just finding out, learning about what would I need. And a lot of teachers back then spoke about the GRE test and needing the IELTS or the TOEFL for the English language exam. So I just started finding out all the information I could, gathering information, bulks and bulks of information about everything I really liked. And I was really good at virology. That was one of my most favorite subjects, still is. And I really thought that I would study virology somewhere in Australia, ideally University of Sydney. So in 2016, when I was finishing up my MSc in the Department of Microbiology, I started preparing for all these tests and I had started earning from a part-time writing job back in those years when freelancers and online workers were looked down upon as people not really having real jobs. So I started doing those jobs. I started working as an online writer for different companies, and I started earning a good amount because I wanted to apply abroad. And while I knew I couldn't really fund my fee that way, I just wanted to have enough to just take those tests, because tests like IELTS, GRE were also really expensive, and universities like Oxford and Cambridge do have an application fee. At the time I applied, it was 70 quid, which I think back then was about 12 or 4, between 12 to 14,000 Pakistani rupees. But in 2016, when I started applying to places, I was fresh out of an MSc and I only had one internship under my belt. I wasn't really hearing back from any of the professors. I wasn't really getting any proper responses. So this was not me applying directly to portals. This was me just reaching out to professors for possible projects that I could do. But I didn't get any positive response. And I had to make a decision about, what do I do next? Do I spend more time in hopes of getting into a program, or do I do another degree? Because a lot of people told me that my BSc honors and MSc was equivalent to 16 years of education, and that might not be enough for a PhD. Well, that was true for a lot of places. You do need an MPhil for a PhD. I knew that the UK doesn't really have that rule. You can get into a PhD right after a bachelor's program if you have good grades. And I, fortunately, in my undergrad, microbiology was a gold medalist. I had gained the first position throughout my degree, and I had earned a gold medal. So I thought that that might work, but in 2016, it did not. So I, one of my friends back then told me that, look, you could either keep applying for these tests and work online, or you could build your CV stronger and just do an MPhil while you're still applying and figuring things out. While I thought I didn't really necessarily need an MPhil because I had a bachelor's, BSc honors, and an MSc, it equated to 16 years of education, but I still applied to an MS. So I thought that I would want to go somewhere else. While I love Karachi University and I give them full credits for all my academic knowledge, because I think I learned a lot about my subjects that I studied more from Karachi University than anywhere else, because I think my undergrad degree gave me the it equipped me with the knowledge I needed for understanding subjects on a base level. So, and I felt really strong in those terms. Then I applied to NUST, which is in Islamabad. It's one of the highest ranking universities in Pakistan. So I thought that if I want to gain another degree just for the sake of having another degree to position myself better, I would choose a high ranking institute so that I can cash the name. Basically, NUST for me was a stepping stone. It wasn't truly a dream or somewhere I necessarily wanted to go, but I thought it would be the next good thing to do for building my CV. So I applied at NUST and I got in. I moved to Islamabad. I stayed there for 2 years, completed my MS, or which is equivalent to MPhil in industrial biotechnology. And I again studied subjects like molecular biology and virology there. And because I had applied to NUST with the aim of using it as a stepping stone, and I already had a gold medal in my undergrad, so now I didn't focus 100% of my attention on my studies, because a lot of the subjects in MS were, fortunately or unfortunately, just a repeat of what I had almost learned in my undergrad. Apart from maybe one or two subjects which gave me new knowledge, everything else was more or less a repeat or a very small upgrade. So I decided that now is my time to keep working online in the evenings to earn my living, because also I was paying my NUST fee myself. I did not get a scholarship there because Pakistani universities at that time didn't really have a lot of scholarships or a lot of support for students. So I had to pay my fee myself, and NUST was an expensive university. Living in Islamabad was expensive. So I was taking classes in the morning, I was working at night, and my weekends I was either catching up on work, or I decided that all of my time would be dedicated to now finding a PhD, now using my NUST degree. So the first year in NUST, the degree was 2 year long. The first year was subjects, studying subjects. It was coursework, and then the second year was for research. So I passed all my coursework, but I also saved money, earned money, and I had built on my diary of where I need to apply, and I had started the application processes. So by the time I was in my second year, final year at NUST, I already had sent out applications to a lot of different places. I had already saved enough to give my IELTS exam. And by that time, I had decided that I would only go for universities that accept the IELTS and don't need other tests. And there's quite a lot of them. I think GRE at that point had started being only something needed in the US, not anywhere else really. So I then started to apply everywhere where GRE was not needed, and there were months and months of rejection. So I was rejected. Surprisingly, I thought I would get in Germany, because a lot of people back in 2016, 2017 were getting into Germany because of the fee waivers, because of easy access to international students. But I, unfortunately or fortunately, did not get in. I got a lot of rejections, and then I was applying to Australia. So I did manage to get into University of Sydney, my dream university, but I did not win any funding. And without funding, I of course could not go there. I also got into the University of Melbourne, but again, same, I did not get funding. So I scored 82% on my University of Melbourne entrance application, but to win a funding, you needed 86%. So that was again a no for me because I couldn't afford going there. At that point, I thought that I am getting all these rejections. I should now, maybe if I've been rejected from everywhere else, I should now apply to Oxford. But even then, I think I had hesitation. So I first applied to universities like University of Cardiff, and I spoke to professors in other universities around the UK. I applied to Imperial College, spoke to a professor there, and I did get in. But again, I was told that for getting funding, because the lab I was applying to did not have funding for international students, so I was told that to get funding I would have to wait another year. And in the meantime, I wrote to a professor in Oxford whose papers I had read a lot of times, and I really did like his work. And I wrote to him, and he suddenly replied to me that, do you want to have a chat over Skype? So this makes me sound ancient, but back then in 2018, there was no Teams. Skype was the way to go for all interviews and calls. So he had a Skype chat with me, and then he said, "Oh, you should formally apply to Oxford, and I already do have some projects. There's already some kinds of scholarships and stuff that you could possibly get if you do well on the interview, and then you could probably get in. So do apply formally, and then if you manage getting through the application stages, you'll probably be here, and I would love to work with you." So that gave me the kind of confidence to just apply, because again, as I said, Oxford did have an application fee of 70 quid, and I did have to pay to apply to Oxford. So I paid that fee and I applied to Oxford. I did get an interview call, and I think by this point, the good thing that had happened out of all rejections, I had read so much about different science projects relevant to my research interests. I had prepared for so many interviews that this felt a bit easier, a bit lighter, and I really enjoyed my Oxford interview process. It felt more like a discussion. So I actually really enjoyed that process, and then I got in, and I surprisingly did so well on my interview that I didn't have to even apply for a scholarship. That interview itself led me to being nominated by Oxford for one of their own graduate scholarships, and within 2 months of clearing the interview, I received a letter saying that I have been nominated for a scholarship. Would I accept it? Of course I did. So, and all this was happening while I was still doing my research project in NAST. So it turned out that while I was building my CV, having had a gold medal, having been enrolled in another research project somewhere else, and at this point I had published 2 papers, and I did have some research experience, so that all counted. So even before I finished my degree at NAST, I already had a secure Oxford admission with scholarship. While a lot of people, a lot of seniors that I reached out to at that point demotivated me. They said, unless you have completed your degree, you have completed your MS, you can't really go for a PhD. And while I know they might have had their own experiences, I'm not saying they wanted to discourage me, probably, but the advice was all against it. But I already got in. So at that point, it was just finishing, wrapping up, and having my viva for my master's in July, and then coming to the UK in September. So overall, I think what got me into Oxford was planning years in advance, being resilient, applying for everything that seemed relevant, and just trying again and again to a lot of places, which gave me the interview expertise, which gave me the confidence to apply, which gave me the confidence to speak about research interests. And I think that all came through. So all the rejections, all the years of preparation, and everything that I had worked on since 2015 finally materialized in 2019. So it was a long journey, but it paid off really well, because I not only got into Oxford, I got a scholarship from Oxford, and then I came here, I've studied, I've since graduated, and now I work here. So I think overall it all worked out really well, and I'm beyond grateful. So yeah, I just wanted to sit and reflect on this journey now that it's all done. It's been a couple of years since I graduated, and I still get questions about how I got in. So I think coming from Karachi, yes, it seems daunting. It seems like it seems damn near impossible, because also, yeah, one question I do get is that I didn't study from an O levels or A level school or a Cambridge board school with GCSEs. So how would I get in? But I want to tell you that I'm not from an O and A levels background or a GCSE background. I studied in Karachi in the Karachi board system. And actually, my college was a government college, a public college. I was from Khatun Pakistan Women's Degree College, which is a public college, and I did a lot of my studies on my own from coaching centers, and I prepared for my IELTS myself. I didn't go to any agencies, I didn't apply through any agents. I just had a lot of, I think, resilience, self belief, and this urge. I think I really had the dream of just going abroad and doing my PhD abroad. So I think that all worked out because I didn't give in. I did not get deterred, or I did not get fixated on not having the right kind of background. Because while I didn't have the right kind of fancy credentials, I did have a gold medal from my public university, and I did have really strong subject knowledge, which comes through in interview. So even though a lot of people consider universities like NUST or LUMS to be the best, and they are good in many ways, but just because you're from somewhere else, or you think your university doesn't rank high enough, doesn't mean you do not know your work, you do not know your subject, because all of that still relies on you. And I think my subject knowledge, my determination, and everything that I had learned in my undergrad paid long term. Because remember, I had started preparing for a PhD when I was an undergrad, when I was still in third year of my undergraduate degree. So that all built up and gave me the experiences, gave me the right kind of confidence to apply. So if you are someone thinking that you're not the right person to apply to Oxford or any of your dream universities, please do apply, because I come from probably similar backgrounds like you. I also did not have my own money. I also did not study in a fancy GCSE or A level system. So if I can get in, why not you? That's always my baseline. I really hope this has given some inspiration to someone, some encouragement to someone being really hesitant to apply. And I wish you all the best. Thank you. Bye.